Blood plague. That is the subject of this video's discussion. I want to pose the question, is the blood plague the least realized mechanic in State of Decay 2, and why? And if it isn't the least realized mechanic, it's gotta be up there. Maybe some people would say it's the lack of base customizations, the cooperative gameplay, maybe the lack of a really meaningful end game. Maybe that's what you'd consider the least realized mechanic in State of Decay 2, but I don't know. Blood Plague, I definitely think it's up there. Feel free to just listen to this video. I'm going to play a few random games, pick through, I don't know, 3 or 4 of them just to have something moving in the video. But if you want, just feel free to listen rather than watch. So what I'm going to do is talk about why I think the Blood Plague, it's just not doing it. And I'm also going to give my suggestions to it. So first off, there's always a disclaimer. I don't hate the game just because I have critiques about it. It's really just something that if you're making guides for the game, it's one of my jobs to play State of Decay 2 and teach others how to play. And part of that means kind of splitting the game apart and learning how it works. And in the process of doing that, you just naturally see things that, well, they're not as good as it could be. It just happens when that's what you do, and you just dissect. You don't even need to be as in-depth as I do. You can just be someone who plays the game a good bit, and you'll quickly learn that Blood Plague, well, it's really not that big of a deal. And I think one of the best comparisons is just right now, at the time of this video's creation, we've got the whole coronavirus going around. And think about the mass hysteria, paranoia that it's causing, and then compare that to Blood Plague in State of Decay 2. We're talking about this poorly understood condition that if someone gets it, it's basically a death sentence unless you get some really obscure antidote that like the military or the government created. Otherwise, you're just dead, and then you're going to come back as like a weird undead being that's like coated in like a festering layer of blood. It should be this really frightening thing that creates mass hysteria and paranoia, much like a real world disease outbreak would be. But once you understand the basics of the Blood Plague, you can sometimes forget that it even exists. In fact, I could actually go and say that the removal of the Blood Plague by wiping out all of the plague hearts in the map, it actually makes you weaker, because then you've cut off your access to Blood Plague samples, and therefore you can't use the insanely powerful Z Hunter items, like the scent block, and you can't sell the bulk plague cure. So you're actually gaining a disadvantage by getting rid of the Blood Plague, and that's how it's just not a big deal. So first off, let's talk about why the Blood Plague is just ineffective. The first issue is that the treatment is really cheap. The time that you're the most vulnerable to Blood Plague is right in the very beginning of the game, especially on Nightmare Zone, because you have the 10-minute timer. But recently, in Update 16, which is what inspired this video, they took away the ongoing meds cost for when you basically check somebody into the infirmary to stabilize them. You would pay an additional 2 medicine per day per community member in order to halt the progress of the Blood Plague until you could cure them. And someone brought up an interesting point. They're like, well, what's the point of the -2 meds per day when it's just so easy to cure the Blood Plague? And I'm like, on one hand, I'm like, that's kind of true. But on the other hand, it's like, well, it shouldn't be true, though. Basically what he was saying is that it didn't make sense to have a -2 meds per day when you can just cure your community member. And I was like, you know what, that's true, but it's not that the medicine loss per day should not make sense. It's that curing people is too easy. And that's the first problem, is that the treatment for the Blood Plague, it's extremely easy. You can use the plague therapy ability in the infirmary. It costs 2 or 3 samples to clear all of the infection as long as it's not complete infection. You could be like 99% infected and just bam, hit that button and you're just fully cured. And once you get going, those samples, they stack up pretty quickly. And then the actual cure itself, the cure for the blood plague, it's like what, 2 or 3 medicine and then like 2 or 3 plague samples? That's nothing. Like once you get going, those are very easy to fulfill because, well, you don't really need medicine for a whole lot. Like you only lose 2 medicine per day from the infirmary for that, so that cost is something that you could easily deal with. And then on top of that, unless you're just constantly making medicine or constantly curing people, medicine is just going to pile up over time. And, maybe you'll spend some medicine to level up somebody's skill in the event, you're doing chemistry. You might make some pills to level up chemistry. You might make like med kits or bandages to level up medicine. But once you've leveled them up, you're not really going to be spending medicine unless you're using the, the strong painkiller production for influence. And if you're doing that, then chances are you're using the trade depot, and that means you're just going to buy your medicine back. And either way, the point is that plague samples are not a problem. Like once you get a few of them, you can just keep them going. Once you get medicine capped out, you're going to just keep going. Like it's not hard to cure the blood plague. And so the fact that the treatment is not hard to administer, it's not hard to keep a supply of it going, it really just nullifies a lot of the threat of the blood plague. Because, oh no, I'm blood plague, time to spend 3 medicine and like 2 or 3 plague samples. Then you got the flip side of it where it's also just very easy to manage a blood plague condition because you get it basically from 3 sources, not including Heartland. You get it from fighting plague zombies, and specifically if you're getting hit. So if you're very good at the melee combat, well, you're not going to get hit very much. You can get it from the plague juggernauts, same thing. You can avoid them, you can ignore them, you can just, play skillfully and not get hit by them. And then you can also get a little bit of blood plague from the plague hearts when they release that plague gas to defend themselves. But the main point is, the main way you're going to get plagued is if you just get locked into a really dumb fight and you're getting bit by plague zombies. Because if you get scratched, yes, it builds up over time, but it's mainly if you're getting bit by plague zombies, and it's mainly if you're just getting directly attacked by plague juggernauts. And all of those are not that hard to play around. It's not hard to avoid blood plague hordes. And if one sees you, you can run away. You can get in a car. You can just not fight them. Also, if you're just really good at melee combat, or if you've got gunslinging, you're just a way to eliminate them quickly, you're just not going to get bit. You're not going to build up the infection level. And then with the blood plague juggernauts, they're not super common. You can outrun them. Your community can now shoot them apart because they've got really good aim now. So overall, even on Nightmare Zone, it's much too easy to manage the blood plague, and it's much too easy to cure it. It's much too easy to prevent it. There are so many ways. And that's just a problem in State of Decay 2 in general. There are so many ways to combat the zombie threat, and they haven't really added any new threats. They've added in Nightmare Zone, but since then, they haven't added any new zombies. They really haven't added anything to increase the zombies threat, while they're always adding new weapons. They added in the Zed Hunter stuff. They're always adding in new ways to combat the zombies, and frankly, the blood plague has been rendered obsolete. You're at the point now where you're just using blood plague items that are intentionally being used that raise your own blood plague, something that you should be direly afraid of. Imagine inject this thing into you and give yourself coronavirus at the expense, but then you can you can't be detected or something, or you can see at night, but let's use inject yourself with a little bit of Ebola, or inject yourself with a little bit of HIV, but then you gain some kind of insane benefit. I mean, your people are basically willingly subjecting themselves to this insane disease, the blood plague, and it's not even a big deal. There's no fear from it, and that's why I think it's such a failed mechanic, in that it's just not a big deal. It doesn't strike fear. There's no paranoia. In fact, a lot of times you don't. It's like if you get blood plague, you're just kind of like, oh man, now I'm all slow until I can cure myself. It just doesn't strike any fear into the player. So that's basically my explanation of like why I just don't think that it makes a difference. And now, to be honest, the -2 meds per day, that isn't going to make much of a difference. The blood plague is just not a big deal. But this is just, it's a recent change. It just brings it up. It just makes it even more apparent. So while that's been explained, like I said, I really want you to think about this blood plague in terms of another just like horrific disease. And why is that paranoia not being added into the game? I feel like that's what the blood plague should be. It should be something, it should be this whole concept where the zombies are a threat that you can fight and you can understand it in an effective manner. You can kind of treat like a zombie's basically a type of wild animal. But the blood plague is supposed to be like this like microbial threat that, maybe I need to wash my hands or I need to, like keep blood plague zombies away. But it's a microscopic thing that it's the fear of like, suspense movies where the threat is like a virus. It's the whole idea that you can't, it's a microbial thing. You can't direct. You're gonna do like, are you gonna like run around with like Lysol flamethrower and just like, I'm gonna spray everything up. I'll show you. You think I can't fight microbial threats? No, it's like it could be airborne. It could be waterborne. It could be skin to skin contact. Who knows? The point is that it should be this like crazy thing that it's kind of, you're gonna get it one way or another. Anyways. Let me talk about my solution. So now that we have kind of gone over why I don't think I just think it's kind of a joke, to be quite frank. So first off, I'm going to give solutions both two kinds. Solutions that I think are plausible in State of Decay 2, and then solutions that I don't think are plausible. Solutions that they'd have to be implemented into State of Decay 3, and maybe they would be implausible there. I'm just going to tell you what I think would be awesome. And that's all I care about. Because I don't care about like, oh my God, is it like realistically implementable? No, this is a video about entertaining you guys. So let's just talk about cool things. So step one, the cure should be rare. So if someone gets fully plagued and you check them in, they should be checked in for a while because it's hard to make the cure. That's what would make the medicine depletion relevant, if it was hard to make the cure. The second thing, though, is that I want the blood plague to be something kind of like an incurable virus, where you can get the cure. The cure is not common. It's uncommon to rare, somewhere in there. But on top of that, if the cure is administered to you, it saves you from the blood plague, but you always have it. You will always carry the blood plague. And to make matters worse, you are more susceptible, despite being cured, to further blood plague infections. So if you keep getting bit, you're going to get the blood plague, a second reoccurrence, even faster than someone who's never had the complete blood plague infection before. And then if you get cured a second time, it just gets worse and worse, because basically the idea is that the blood plague is adapting to the cure. Because like that's just things that viruses do. HIV is a good example of that. It is capable of adapting, and it's its survival mechanism. And that's kind of how I imagine this blood plague to work. So you can get to the point where maybe after 4 curings, one bite, and you're just bam, immediately fully blood plagued. And maybe after 4 curings, you're just screwed. The second thing that I'd want to do is blood plague zombies. Why do they congregate in hordes? Basically, one of my lore elements would be that the blood plague attracts other blood plague infected zombies. So if you have somebody in your base who is fully infected, you've got them stabilized with the -2 meds per day, well, you're going to start getting blood plague sieges, because the blood plague zombies, there's just something about it that they're just instinctually lured to it. So in addition to basically what would happen is you would start getting sieges like normal, but you're going to get like blood plague sieges. Instead of regular zombies, it might be half and half. And the more people you have plagued and the more severe, maybe they've been cured like 3 times, you could get basically 100% plague zombies attacking. And now you basically, this is what I want. I want you to put somebody in that infirmary, and I want you to seriously consider, hey, maybe we can't get the cure for 7 in-game days. Maybe we euthanize this guy. I want you to really have to think about it. You don't have to think about it. I euthanize people in the game just for the lulls. I'm like, it's so funny just to let blap people. It's like, it's not a big decision at all. So how do you make that a big decision? This idea that maybe you run out of medicine. So you're like, we have to euthanize them for the greater good. Maybe it is risking other people getting infected. And now you've got multiple people infected and you don't have the cure. So you're like, oh man, we have to get rid of them, because if no one is infected in the community, then you won't get these blood plague sieges. The next thing I want to do, I want to get into this like microbial concept, and I want to introduce a mechanic called contamination. This will also kind of go towards the end game of State of Decay that I think the game just doesn't, frankly, I just don't think it really has an end game, but I want to add this thing in called contamination. Contamination is basically the saturation of the blood plague disease in the land and the ecosystem itself. So I want to add this concept where when blood plague zombies are killed, if they're killed in a certain range of your base, and the more brutally they're killed, it adds contamination to the ground. And so like their infected blood goes into the soil, it seeps down, and it enters into basically, the water system, the natural aquifer. And well, you're drinking this water, and so all of a sudden, people will just naturally gain blood plague over time, even though they're not being bit. It's this idea, it's in the air, it's in the water, it's in the land. It's like you're just in this diseased land. And I want to add this kind of like paranoia of like, how do you fight a microbial threat? You can fight blood plague zombies. Like I said, you might have this idea where maybe if you shoot a blood plague zombie with an arrow, it kills them cleanly. Like their head doesn't blow up, like get rid of that. That's some silliness. They just crumple up and fall over, and it doesn't add any contamination to the ground because you didn't like obliterate their body. But if you fired like a grenade launcher and you just blasted a group of their bodies apart, well, their rancid innards and just their gore-soaked juices are blasted all over the place, and you add to the contamination. And then I want to add this kind of idea that one of your facilities that a base is going to have is kind of like, you've got your parking spots, you got your storage, command center. Well, everyone just always is going to have a burn pit. And so basically, you need to clean up the zombies and burn them in order to prevent them from just like off-gassing blood plague into the air and contaminating the air. And this is kind of like what you can do to kind of heal the ecosystem, to keep your base more habitable. And so what I want to do is have this idea that if the blood plague gets severe enough, not only do you contaminate the land and you start drinking partially infected blood plague water, but it's going to start terraforming the environment, just like what you saw in Heartland. Like you're going to start noticing, hey, the grass seems a little reddish. That's strange. The trees, they've got this kind of like weird slime oozing out of them. Like the actual landscape is going to start getting terraformed, and that's going to attract more blood plague zombies. They are just naturally drawn to these areas, and the ecosystem uses this because the more bodies that are blood plague, they can use those bodies. More of their like gore-soaked innards can spill into the land, and then like the land becomes like this weird, like I said, just like Heartland, this blood plague ecosystem. It starts forming like a blood plague environment, and then maybe you get to the point where you just have to abandon your base altogether because it's just non-viable. Like the blood plague zombies have claimed it, and it turns into like downtown Marshall in State of Decay 2 Heartland expansion. And maybe if it gets high enough, you start seeing unique types of enemies that you don't see anywhere else. So basically, and this should be able to happen not just at your base, but it should also just happen out in the world. Like there should be this idea that there's this hostile ecosystem that is growing to challenge you. That way, there's always something for you to do. There's always this idea that you can go to actual war with an entire town block. An entire town block becomes infested with blood plague. And so, it gives you a reason to break out the best weapons in the game, because it's like a whole freaking city that has to be, it doesn't have to be, but if you want to, you can like purge the entire city. And I also want to add this idea that there needs to be paranoia. Like every time you meet a human, you need to wonder, like, is this guy infected? Is he lying to me? You should be like, okay, in the coronavirus, like there are people where I might walk too close to them. They'll be, hey, get back. Social distancing, 6 feet. Like they treat you like you're a leper. Like if you sneeze, not because, just something itches your nose, like a bug, and you see everyone's like, oh my God, he's got the virus. And people are just like super paranoid. Well, that needs to be communicated in the game through like the blood plague. Like every time you recruit somebody, you should be like, is this guy plagued? How much infection? We're all technically infected. How infected? Is he going to turn overnight? Like, you should, like, be able to, like, vet people, investigate people. Like, you should be able to interrogate people. And maybe, like, even your allies. Like, you might get, like, enclaves. You can go over there and be like, oh, my God, no one expects the blood plague Inquisition. You wouldn't happen to be hacking up some bloody phlegm, would you? Oh, my God. Are you guys infected? I'm so sorry, but I'm going to have to board you up inside your own building and burn your building down with you inside of it. So sorry. Just this normally doesn't happen, but you're just going to have to, live with it. Like, that's just something that the blood plague should do. There should just be this, like, paranoia where you don't trust people just because this microbial threat is not something that you can fight very easily. Then I want to introduce solutions. Problems need solutions. So introducing a new weapon, the flamethrower. The flamethrower is going to be a weapon that is both a tool to destroy zombies, but also a tool to purify infected landscapes. So if you have this building and it's just overtaken with blood plague growth, it's something that you can't like hack it up with like an axe or something. You have to burn it with fire. So you have to use a flamethrower, and you actually have to like burn these buildings in order to actually like purify them. And then, like if there's a base and you want to move in there, yeah, you might have to burn the entire base. And then you would have to spend the resources to clean up the base. Like you'd have to clean up all of the ashes, all of the everything out of it. Like, and and you can like renovate it. And like, that I think that's something that could go into the economy as well. Like this idea that you could like sell off buildings, or you could clear an area and say, hey, there's this perfectly good area we've renovated, and then maybe people pay you influence to move in there, and you get like an allied enclave, and they paid you to move in there, and you can basically become like plague house flippers, basically. Just yet another thing that they could do to add to the economy. But the point is that I think it would be really neat. Like I said, it would give you a reason where you'd have this whole town that's just overtaken with blood plague, weird enemies, huge quantities of zombies. Well, now you have a reason to go in there, break out your grenade launchers, break out, your eternal guard, break out your automatic shotguns, break a reason to break out the best weapons, the most OP weapons in the game. And then when the battle is done and everything is, destroyed, then you can actually go through the restoration effort of burning the entire city, basically, burning the whole town. Or maybe the zombie resistance is so bad that you set up an outpost there and you're like, nope, we'll have to burn it quadrant by quadrant. We clear the zombies, burn it, move to a different quadrant of the city. Maybe you just go like block by block, street by street. Like it just gives you something reoccurring to do. And then on the other hand, I think another thing they should add are human raids, where the more beautiful your base is, like if you're really good at keeping the blood plague out and you have this beautiful base, the water is clean, well, other people want it. They're like, hey, you're not letting us in. What? You're not having a community of 100 people, you're not letting every single person in. Well, we're going to let ourselves in. So all of a sudden, one of the downsides to being like really successful is that other people want what you have, but there'd have to be some kind of mechanic where if you defeat one of these raids, it like frightens other people and they're kind of like, oh God, don't screw with those guys. Like they just mowed down like 40 humans who like invaded their territory. Like obviously don't screw with these guys. But that's what I think is both the problem with the Blood Plague and the solution. The bottom line is that I just do not think that the Blood Plague is a good successor to the disease system. And I don't even think the disease system was all that great, but I do think that because of how random the disease system was in State of Decay 1, it did have that kind of paranoia where if somebody got just a cough, you were kind of like, are they going to recover? Most of the time, yes, but if they don't recover after one day, you kind of look at them like, are you going to get sicker? And there's just this kind of like this doubt. It was at least a doubt in your mind that whether or not they're going to be okay. And I think that is just not communicated in any way with the Blood Plague. And that's what I think has to be done. And like I said, I don't think this is something that would be done in State of Decay 2. I think it would upset the balance of the game too much. But maybe that's something that you do in State of Decay 3, and that way, not only is the Blood Plague a greater threat, more thematic, more consistent with the very story that State of Decay 2, that Undead Labs is trying to tell, but you also have a potential reoccurring endgame where you're battling against this entire ecosystem, something that, maybe you're not really capable of defeating, but rather something that you're managing. And you're battling it both inside your bodies, you're battling it in terms of zombies, but then you're battling in terms of the very landscape itself, giving you, like I said, just something to do. Something not just to do, but a reason to break out the best weapons in the game. Something that gives you greater interactivity. But at any rate, that's what I think. Tell me what you think down in the comment sections. And yeah, give me that interactivity. Share the video with other people. If these kinds of videos get enough views, these are the kinds of videos that Undead Labs does actually listen to, because this is an entire video that is just feedback and ideas. It's just free ideas for Undead Labs. And like I said, I don't think I was like mean or anything like that in it. I don't think I'm hating on the game. I'm just saying that I think the Blood Plague could be a lot better, and that's how I would do it. How would you do it, though? What do you think? Anyways, that's going to be the end of that. Leave a comment down in the comment section. Like this video if it was interesting or entertaining. Subscribe for future State of Decay 2 Juggernaut Edition content. Of course, remember that you don't have to be good to get good.